Picture the dream. You buy a real fort. Ancient stone walls, a gatehouse, ramparts you can walk along at sunset. A piece of history that is entirely yours. It feels like the ultimate property. A castle in all but name. Bought for a price that can be surprisingly low. Because who else is in the market for a fort? Now here is the paradox that turns that dream inside out. Every single feature that once made this fort magnificent, that made it strong, defensible, and valuable, is now the exact feature that makes it a financial nightmare. Those thick stone walls you fell in love with are the thing you cannot afford to maintain. A remote, commanding position is the thing that keeps anyone from easily reaching it. A sheer defensive scale, built to house hundreds of soldiers, is the thing that makes it impossible to heat, to repair, or to live in. A fort was engineered, at enormous cost, for one single purpose: to be impregnable. And the cruel joke of owning one today is that impregnable and practical are opposites. You have bought the most robust, permanent, expensive to maintain kind of building ever devised, designed for a purpose that vanished centuries ago, and now you must find something, anything, for it to do. By the end of this video, you will know what a fort actually costs to buy and, far more importantly, to keep, why every heroic feature is now a liability, why you are often forbidden from changing the very things that make it impractical, and why the only way to make a fort pay is to sell the one thing it has left. Let me open the ledger. The asset designed for the wrong century. Start with the thing that makes a fort unlike any normal property, because it explains every cost that follows. A house is designed to be lived in. An office is designed to be worked in. A fort was designed for none of that. It was designed to withstand attack, to shelter a garrison, to dominate a piece of ground, and every choice in its construction served that one goal, with no thought whatsoever for comfort, efficiency, or the convenience of a future owner who just wanted a nice place to live. So, you inherit a building whose entire logic is wrong for any peaceful use. Its walls are absurdly thick, not for insulation, but to stop cannon fire, which means they are staggeringly expensive to repair and often impossible to modify. Its rooms are laid out for defense and storage and barracks, not for family life. Its windows, where they exist at all, are small and few, because a window is a weakness in a wall, meant to keep people out. Its whole structure is vast, because it had to hold a fighting force, which means you are now the owner of a building many times larger than any human purpose requires, and every square foot of it needs a roof kept on and stone kept sound. This is the root of the entire problem. You have not bought a large house. You have bought a machine for a war that ended long ago, and machines built for one purpose are notoriously bad at any other. A fort does exactly what it was designed to do. It endures. It refuses to fall down or change or be anything other than what it is, and that stubbornness, once its greatest virtue, is now its owner's greatest burden. No normal building is built to last like this. A house is meant to be knocked down and replaced eventually, adapted, extended, modernized. A fort was built to defy exactly that, to resist every force that might change or destroy it, and it succeeds. It resists you too. Every instinct you have to make it livable runs straight into stone that was placed centuries ago, precisely so that nobody could ever move it. Why it is so cheap to buy and so ruinous to keep, now the trap that catches the dreamer, because the purchase price is the smallest part of the story. Forts can sell shockingly cheap. Sometimes a genuine historic fort changes hands for less than an ordinary suburban house, and the buyer cannot believe their luck. A fort for the price of a bungalow. But the low price is not a bargain. It is a warning, and it is the market telling you something precise. Its purchase price is low, precisely because everybody who understands these buildings knows that the real cost is not buying it, it is keeping it. Here is the arithmetic that the low price hides. Maintenance of a large, ancient stone structure is relentless and enormous. Stone erodes, roofs fail, damp gets in, mortar crumbles, and on a building this size, made to this standard, every repair is a major, specialist, expensive undertaking because you cannot fix historic stonework with ordinary builders and ordinary materials. An annual cost to stop a fort from slowly falling down can exceed what many people earn in a year. forever, with no end and no equity gained. Just the privilege of holding decay at bay for one more season. So the price tag is a trapdoor. It is set low enough to tempt someone in, and then the true cost, the bottomless permanent maintenance, reveals itself only once they own it and cannot easily get out. Many a romantic buyer has purchased a fort for the price of a car and been bankrupted by the price of its roof. And unlike an ordinary house, there is no ceiling on the surprise. A leaking roof on a suburban home is a known, bounded cost. A failing roof spanning a fort, in materials the law insists you match, using craftsmen who are rare and booked years ahead, is a cost that can run to many times what the whole building sold for. The purchase was the cheap part precisely because the roof, the walls, and the centuries of accumulated decay are the expensive part, patiently waiting for the new owner to discover them. A cheapness of the sale is not generosity. It is the previous owner escaping. The heritage cage? Now the twist that removes your last escape route, and it surprises almost everyone. You might think, fine, if the fort is impractical, I will change it. Modernize it, subdivide it, adapt it, make it work. And here you slam into the heritage cage. A fort of any significance is almost always a protected historic structure. And that protection comes with rules, strict, unbending rules, about what you are and are not allowed to do to it. You cannot knock through those thick walls to make a modern layout. You cannot replace the old windows with efficient new ones. You cannot re-roof it in cheap, modern materials, or alter its appearance, or adapt it freely to a new use. In many cases, you are legally obliged to maintain it to a specified historic standard, using specified traditional methods and materials, whether you can afford to or not. A state has an interest in this building surviving as it is, and it will hold you to that, regardless of the drain on your finances. So the heritage protection creates a perfect vice. Those features that make the fort impractical are the exact features you are forbidden from changing. You are trapped between a building you cannot use as it is, and a law that will not let you change it into something you can. You own it, you pay for it, but you do not control it. You are less an owner than a custodian, funding the preservation of a monument that the public, in a sense, has decided must be kept at your expense. It is a strange kind of ownership, closer to guardianship. On paper, the deed is yours. In practice, you are holding the building in trust for history, paying its bills, obeying its rules, and enjoying only such use of it as the rules allow. You carry all the costs of ownership and only a fraction of the freedom, and the difference between the two is measured in the maintenance you cannot avoid and the changes you cannot make. Listen to that again. You are legally obliged to preserve, at your own cost, the very features that make the building useless to you. Say that again? Thick walls, impractical layout, the vast scale, the remote position, all the things that make a fort a burden, are frequently the things you are required by law to maintain exactly as they are. You cannot fix the problem by removing the cause of the problem, because the cause of the problem is precisely what the building is legally required to remain. That is the heart of the fort owner's predicament. You have bought a permanent obligation dressed up as a property, and an obligation, unlike a property, does not get easier to hold over time. A normal building you can improve, let appreciate, and eventually sell at a profit. This one you can only maintain at rising cost, toward a sale price the market has already told you will be low, because the next buyer is looking at the same trap you are standing in. The obligation compounds. The property does not, which raises the only question that matters. If you cannot live in it easily, cannot change it, and cannot stop paying for it, how on earth do you make a fort make money? What you are actually selling. So step back and ask what a fort has left to offer. Once you accept that as a fort, and even as a home, it is nearly worthless. An answer is the one thing the fort has in abundance, and the one thing it can never lose. Atmosphere, history, romance, drama. A fort is a spectacular, evocative, one-of-a-kind place. And while nobody needs a fortress, an enormous number of people will pay for an experience wrapped inside one. That is the entire business model of the successful fort. You stop trying to use the building, and you start selling the feeling of the building. You cannot make it a practical home, so you make it a destination. A hotel, where guests pay a premium to sleep inside history. A wedding venue, where the drama of the walls is the whole product. A tourist attraction, charging admission to walk the ramparts. A film location where it's impossible to fake authenticity earns real money. No set builder can fake centuries of real stone, and every location scout knows it, which is why a genuine fort can command serious fees for a few days of filming, earning more in a week on camera than it might in a month of ordinary use. An events venue where companies pay for the sheer spectacle of the setting. In every case, the logic is the same, and it is the exact inversion of the problem. Those features that make the fort a poor house, its scale, its drama, its age, its impregnable presence, are precisely the features that make it an extraordinary experience. What you cannot sell as accommodation, you sell as atmosphere. An obsolete war machine becomes a stage, and the owner stops being a frustrated resident and becomes an impresario, charging the world for the privilege of stepping, briefly, inside a piece of history. So the fort that is worthless for its original purpose, and impractical for any ordinary one, can be valuable for exactly one thing: being itself, dramatically, in front of paying visitors. The ledger. So where does the money go for the owner trying to make this work? A dominant cost, always, is the fabric. Maintaining the stone, the roofs, the walls, the structure to the heritage standard demanded, using specialist craftsmen and traditional materials, forever. This is the anchor that never lifts, and it is why an underfunded fort is always, quietly, dying. Then the cost of adaptation within the rules. To run a hotel or a venue, you need heating, plumbing, kitchens, safety systems, access, all of it installed into a building that fights every modern intervention and permits only sympathetic, expensive, reversible ones. Making an ancient fort meet modern safety and comfort standards without being allowed to alter it much is a costly, delicate, endless piece of engineering. Then the ordinary costs of whatever business you run inside it. The staff, the marketing, the running of a hotel or an attraction, which are hard enough in a normal building and harder in one where nothing is standard and everything is fragile. And against all of that, the revenue depends entirely on your ability to sell the romance, night after night, event after event, season after season, in high enough volume to cover a cost base that would sink almost any ordinary building. A fort does not fail because nobody comes. It fails because the cost of existing is so high that even a steady stream of paying visitors can struggle to cover it. The trap. The trap of the fort is one of the purest in this whole series because it is baked into the stone itself. You are buying a permanent, non-negotiable cost attached to an asset with no practical use. Think about the position. A maintenance bill is enormous, relentless, and legally enforced. You cannot reduce it by modifying the building because the law forbids it. You cannot escape it by using the building normally because it was never built to be used normally. You cannot even easily sell your way out because the next buyer faces the exact same trap and the market knows it, which is why the price was so low when you bought it. You are locked to a bottomless cost, holding an asset almost nobody else wants, forbidden from changing the thing that makes it a burden. And the only exit, the only way the numbers can ever work, is to succeed continuously and skillfully at a difficult hospitality or tourism business in a remote and awkward building forever. At the moment that business falters, the moment the visitors thin or the events dry up, the maintenance bill does not pause to sympathize. Its stone keeps eroding, the roof keeps aging, the law keeps demanding, and the fort begins, quietly, to consume its owner. Many grand forts and castles have been abandoned not because nobody loved them, but because loving them was not enough to pay for their roofs. That is the quiet tragedy behind every romantic ruin. Somewhere in its past was an owner who adored it and could not afford it, who fought the maintenance for as long as they could and then walked away, leaving the stone to the weather. The abandonment was not a failure of love, it was a failure of arithmetic. And the fort, indifferent as ever, went on standing anyway. A second trap is the seduction itself. Forts are sold by romance, and romance is a terrible financial advisor. A very emotional pull that makes someone buy a fort is the thing that stops them doing the cold arithmetic that would have warned them off. They fall in love with the walls at sunset and never calculate the cost of keeping those walls standing, and by the time the true numbers arrive, they are already committed, already spending, already trapped inside the dream that has quietly become a debt. The history digression. It is worth understanding why so many of these buildings exist to be bought at all, because it is a story of sudden, total obsolescence. For centuries, the fort was the ultimate expression of power on the land. To hold a strong fortress was to hold a region, and nations poured staggering resources into building walls thick enough and high enough to withstand anything an enemy could bring against them. It was the safest, strongest, most valuable structure a ruler could possess, and its walls were the difference between survival and conquest. Then technology moved, as it always does, and the balance that justified the fort collapsed. New methods of attack made even the mightiest walls suddenly vulnerable, and the enormous, immovable fortress went, over a relatively short span, from the pinnacle of military value to a pile of obsolete stone. A very permanence that had been its glory became its curse. A fort could not be repurposed, could not be moved, could not be cheaply demolished. It stood there, magnificent and useless, long after the world that needed it had gone. And that is why, centuries later, you can buy one for the price of a house. It is not a bargain. It is the long echo of an obsolescence so complete that the greatest buildings of an age became, in the end, somebody else's very expensive problem. The verdict. So, could you make money owning a fort? Yes, but only by completely abandoning the reason most people want one. This is not a home, not a monument to be lovingly inhabited, not a private castle. It is a difficult, high-cost hospitality asset with a spectacular, unique selling point and a punishing cost base, and it works only for the owner who treats it with cold, unromantic discipline. Here is the good year. You have accepted that the fort is a business, not a dream. You have converted it, within the heritage rules, into a spectacular hotel or a sought-after wedding and events venue. The romance that made it a poorhouse makes it an irresistible destination, and people pay a premium precisely because it is a real fort. Bookings are steady, events are full, the premium prices cover the punishing maintenance, and there is even something left over. You are not living a fantasy. You are running a demanding business well, and the building's drama is your greatest asset instead of your greatest burden. And here is the bad year. You bought the dream, not the business. Maintenance bills arrived like a tide, relentless and legally enforced, and the romance that sold you the fort turns out not to pay for its roof. A remote location that felt magical keeps the visitors away. Heritage rules block every cheap fix. Events do not fill the calendar, the hotel does not fill its rooms, and the gap between what it costs to keep the fort standing and what it earns grows wider every season until the dream quietly becomes the thing that ruins you, and you become one more owner trying to sell an impossible building to the next hopeful romantic. Same fort, standing exactly as it has for centuries. What separates a fortune from a ruin is whether the owner fell in love with the walls or with the numbers. The building does not care which. It will stand either way, indifferent to whether its owner is thriving or drowning, because it was built to outlast far more than one owner's finances. That indifference is the final lesson of the fort. It was never on anyone's side. It endures, and it will let you prosper or ruin yourself against it with the same blank, permanent patience. Thesis close. Most of the assets in this series lost their value when their purpose died. A fort is stranger because it lost its purpose entirely, centuries ago, and yet it refuses, absolutely, to go away. It just stands there, indestructible and useless, the perfect answer to a question nobody asks anymore. And that is the whole paradox of owning one. You are buying the most durable, most permanent, most impressive kind of building ever made, stripped of the one function it was built for, protected by law in the exact form that makes it impractical, and left with only its atmosphere to sell. Everything heroic about it is now a cost. Everything impractical about it is now, if you are clever and cold enough, a product. You are not buying a castle. You are buying a magnificent, immovable obligation, a war machine that outlived its war, and the entire art of owning it is turning the one thing it has left, the sheer romance of the impregnable, into enough money to keep the walls standing for one more generation, so that the fort can go on doing the only thing it was ever good at, which is refusing, century after century, to fall.